Wonderful. Happy New Year, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today. Really excited to kick off this conversation. Uh, it's a three-part series. We're going to be introducing our fantastic speaker here in a second, Adriianna Lagorio. Want to make sure you guys know you're in the right place, but also want to give you a heads up. Oh, I'm going the wrong way. Sorry about that. Brief introduction. Hi, everyone. Anna Stephanie with famtech.org. We do virtual and in-person events. We're a group of about 300 plus members supporting innovation across the care economy if this is your first kind of interaction with us. So welcome, everyone. We have not only this three-part series coming up with a special guest in the next part of this series, and I'll let Adriianna let you know who's going to be joining us, but we also have an exciting virtual event with Dr. Carolyn Emmer in February, talking about the role of AI in caregiving, and she is with Oxford's University Center for AI and Ethics, and there's a tech pledge that's coming out of Oxford that I really encourage you to join if you're at that intersection of AI and caregiving, like so many of us are. Our next in-person is going to be a side event with Transform, which is a conference in Las Vegas focused on employee benefit solutions. If you haven't been to that conference and are selling into HR, take a look at it. We do have discounts available for FamTech members. All right, without further ado, really excited to bring this conversation to life. We've been talking about our role as a 501c6. We've launched our policy strategy committee to really start opening up the conversation around innovation and caregiving. We crossed paths with Adriianna a while back and loved the work that she was doing. And in her current consulting role with Lagorio Consulting, to help us understand how, as founders, as advocates, how can we be most effective when thinking about the role policy can play when we're building our solutions, when we're scaling our companies. We tend to, in the care space, get to a point where a public policy change can be a meaningful market opportunity. A public policy change can also be a reduction in market opportunity. And so, how do we think about one, how to interpret, how to influence this, how to incorporate a potential government affairs strategy into your company. And I can't think of a better person to help us walk through that process than Adriianna. So welcome, Adriianna. I'll hand it over to you. And
Thank
you can
you.
share your screen in a minute. Let me stop. Um, and thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm just gonna come up here and let me know that.
While you're opening up your screen, one thing I forgot to do, it's sort of in our FamTech tradition, if you could put your name, your company, and where you're located in the chat, it's a great way for people to know who's on the call. Awesome. Take it away, Adriana.
And I assume you all can see my screen and everything looks good. Okay, awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. And this is a three-part training. And the first things first that Anna was thought that would be very beneficial for us to know is, do you need a federal policy strategy, right? I would probably argue that about 85% of people, if not more, need one. But I deduced, what kind of questions or what you would need to ask in order to ascertain that. So my name's Adriianna. I'm a government affairs consultant, and then just a little bit about me so you can get to know me a little bit more. I have close to a decade of experience working in politics and policy. I am a former legislative director in the U.S. House of Representatives. I worked for Congresswoman Jamie Herrera Butler, if any of you know her or have worked with her. I was then a lobbyist for nonprofits that work to support women, families, and children. After that, I also work to help create and fund various multi-million dollar initiatives within the federal government. And I am a self-proclaimed nerd on all things policy, funding, and Congress. So that is really, my repertoire of things. In this course, you are going to learn three things. What is a government relations strategy? I'm going to be using federal policy and government relations interchangeably. How to decide if you need one and why it's important for you and your business. Why does this matter? We're gonna accomplish these three things in the training. So before we start, because there's a lot of us in this room, and this is going to be really important as we're talking about federal government relations strategies, is we're going to do some connection before the content. So this is a question I'm going to ask you, and I want you to think about it, write it down, put it in the back of your mind, and I'll explain to you why this is important when we're thinking about a federal policy strategy. So, if someone stopped you on the street, what's the one topic you could talk about without any preparation? So I'm gonna let you all think about this. I might put Anna on the spot about this, but I'll start with mine because it actually happened to me one day in San Francisco. Someone actually stopped me on the street, and I ended up talking to them about this. So if someone stopped me on the street, I could talk their ear off about maternal health, maternal mental health. It is something that I am super passionate about. It is something that I worked on heavily when I was in Congress, even prior to having a little one. So I would be able to probably talk to you for hours about that if you would listen to me. But this is important as you're thinking about it because this is also going to help you get to your why, right? This is the thing that's behind your strategy. This is what's driving you. This is what's helping you when Congress is being very frustrating and you can't get anything through. So remember that your why is going to be really important as you decide if you need a federal policy strategy or not. Would anyone, I know we're recording this, but would anyone else like to share? Anyone have this or anyone thought about this? Okay, I see some people, so just jump on in. Stephanie, I saw you.
Yes, I'd be happy to share. My dog is barking. Can you guys hear that? Okay, good. Voice, thank, thank goodness for voice isolation. So, for me, my why is because I was married really young and I got into my first marriage really not knowing what questions to ask and what a partnership looked like.
Mhm.
So, by the time I was 25, I was married and divorced. And I went into my second marriage um, saying that I would never get remarried, never saying never. But this time I went into it with more knowledge and power. And I had conversations with my husband about what that looked like. I would not give up my career, that we would have a partnership, that it wouldn't be one-sided, that I wouldn't be the one making all the
Yeah.
sacrifices. And so we got into that. He was all for it, agreed on that, and we were all on the same page. One second, I'm so sorry.
No problem. And I think we know where you're going. We're going to have to put your company in there. This is the why for sure. And Elia, do you want to share really quick?
Oh, I was just going to share. It's for me, it's teen and tween girl adolescent mental health. Could speak about it for hours.
I
I
love it.
love it. I love it. And I will share care infrastructure, paid family leave. I'll talk your ear off on that one.
So sorry, I had someone at my door. But would you like me to pick up where I was?
I think we're going to transition a little bit, but I really appreciate you sharing. And I'd love for you in the chat, Stephanie, to put like what that became because
Oh
I
yeah.
think it's really cool.
Yep, absolutely, I will.
Great. So again, this is your why. This is what's motivating you and keeping you moving. So let's get into the who, what, when, where, how. What is a federal policy strategy? So I love that when I tell people I'm a lobbyist, they immediately like their ears perk up and it's like, oh, what does that mean? So most people, when you talk about like a federal policy strategy or lobbyist or consultants, they think of, this movie. If anyone remembers, I might be dating myself. Thank you for smoking. As a lobbyist, making a lot of money trying to get more people to engage in unhealthy behavior. Or as a more maybe modern time, they think of like, they think of Harvey Specter. They think of, oh, this guy is like twisting arms and helping companies. He's a lawyer, or the lawyer is the lobbyist, right? That's what I feel like people normally think about when they're even thinking of hiring a lobbyist or engaging in some sort of federal policy strategy. They're going to have to deal with these types of people. However, I will tell you that this is how I view it, and this is what I've seen in my experience. A federal policy strategy, when we're talking about it, and what we really mean is that it should help you do the following things. It should help you navigate, it should help you advocate, and it should help you influence, right? So whether that's done with your company, whether that's done in-house, whether that's done with consultants, These should be the three things it comes back to. Or, as I like to say, a federal policy strategy helps you take your business and your mission to the next level. And I was really thinking about, if we were gonna do some definitions or break things down, how I would define it. So this is what I came up with. So a strategy to align your business goals and adapt to the public policy environment, right? So you can be a business, you can be doing your own thing, but eventually I would probably argue you're going to have to deal with the government or Congress or someone because something's going to happen. So it's good to be able to align your business goals with the public policy environment. And if there's one thing to remember of this whole training is that when you're engaging in a federal policy strategy, you want to make sure that it's sustainable. So if it's not sustainable, you're going to get charged a lot of money and you're going to be having to jump every time the administration changes or Congress changes. So what I always try to tell people is this sustainable? If, the next day a Democrat came into office, would your strategy be able to survive? If not, then we need to talk about it, or we need to fire your current consultants, right? So that is something that we should always be focusing on when we're considering what a federal policy strategy is. And then I think it's good for you to also know the who around this. There are different types of lobbyists, and I think when people are wanting to engage in a strategy, they should know the types because that's going to help you make an informed decision. So the first is white hat lobbyist. I like to define these as lobbyists who are working for organizations like nonprofits, foundations, etc. And really, the way I can tell if someone's a white hat lobbyist or not is if they're donating to political campaigns themselves or on behalf of their clients, right? I'm not saying that's bad. I'm not saying it's wrong. I'm just saying that when I think of a white hat lobbyist, they're using their own voice. They're using different resources that aren't financial or aren't navigating the political environment, like campaign donations. So that's how I define it. Black hat. These are the lobbyists that I guess maybe you would think of like Harvey Specter or the guy from Thank You for Smoking. They're the ones who are really using their political influence, using donations, donating on behalf of clients, and really using those resources to make a difference. However, that does not mean that they are bad. That just means that the way they approach things is a little bit different. And some of the best lobbyists I know are black hat lobbyists, and they do lobby for, women's health. They do lobby for children's health. So it's not that they're just, I don't know, working for big oil or something. They do different things. It's just that they will engage in the political side and make donations, go on pack trips, etc. And then the last one, which you all might be more aware of, are in-house lobbyists. So these are people who work within a company to do their lobbying, their government affairs efforts, etc. So that's the world of lobbying. And then the types of strategy you can engage in. So we know the who, and now this is just the what, more of the what, and the how. So you can be offensive, which means you're proactively going to the Hill and you're like, we need 14 weeks of paid leave, and this is a new idea, and we need to do it. Great, that's offensive. You're introducing an idea. There's defensive, which is something happened that you are not in favor of, and you are fighting against it. So I don't know, thinking of paid leave, say all of a sudden a regulation comes out and they say that we have completely decided to get rid of paid leave for federal workers, right? You would be defensively going and trying to make sure that doesn't happen. And then educational. This one is one of the most, I would say, undersold ones because of the fact that people don't really think of it as engaging or a strategy, but sometimes it's just that people don't know you exist. And so you need to go to Capitol Hill and literally spend time just meeting with staffers and sharing your knowledge and talking about your product and what you're doing. So I think educational lobbying, no matter if it's offensive or defensive, this is something you have to do all the time. Also, one thing to remember is that Congress turns over a lot, and so do staff. So you might be having the same conversation like 10 times just because you're educating on your product and what you want and your policy initiatives, etc. And then finally, the types of organizations that may need a federal policy strategy. So these are nonprofits, foundations, educational institutions, just kind of a laundry list, probably people you would think of, but there are a very diverse group of folks who might need a federal policy strategy. All right, the next thing is, do you need a GR strategy? So we talked about the who, what, when, where, why, what it is, and now the question is, do you actually need one? So I took all my knowledge working on Capitol Hill and then becoming a lobbyist and was trying to figure out, okay, if I needed a federal policy strategy, what would I include in this and what would I ask myself? So I don't know if anyone watches college football, but you know how they hold up like those posters on the sideline and it has all these random photos and you're supposed to know what the play is? I would be horrible at that. I would overthink what the play is, but I made one for our presentation. So what does Hershey's, raspberries, the snoo, and the government of Turkey all have in common? Oh, where did I go? Anyone? Yeah, it's weird. It's weird. What they all have in common? They all have a government affairs strategy. Very good. Very good. They all have a government affairs strategy. They all have someone who's advocating for them in Congress, and this is something that yeah, it is. And one of the things is it's just you would never realize their association. But there you go. Now you can play this with someone and see if they can figure it out. So yeah, very unrelated things, but they all are engaging in some way with the federal government. So now to the questions. So,
Could you give examples on that, Adriana? I'm just super
oh,
like,
yeah. Okay.
I mean,
So
I get a government of Turkey potentially, let's say.
yes. So for example, I don't know if anyone has read John Boehner's book, but for example, Hershey's has people who are the sugar beet farmers who lobby Congress every year to keep the subsidies for sugar at the same level. They don't want to change. They like their subsidy. And they are one of the most powerful lobbies in the entire United States. So, for example, the sugar beet folks will go to Congress every year and say, hey, we like our subsidies. Please keep our subsidies. Here's a candy bar. That's like their lobbying. The berries, there are berry farmers who there are various programs at USDA that support cultivation, and they have their own lobby that go or a group that lobbies Congress in order to support those programs and agricultural research at USDA. The SNU, they are very focused on military mental health. And so, and I'm just speaking of this just from observation, they have been very focused on increasing support for military members to get a SNU, right? So it's like an actual physical product and getting the military to put more support so service members can get a SNU or put money towards renting a SNU when they have a newborn. And then, yes, the government of Turkey, as you all can imagine, international lobbying, that can get a little bit tricky, but this really is working within different, political crises, different military strategic systems, etc. So, yeah, those are how those all kind of wrap together.
Thank you. That's cool.
Yeah. So yeah, the 5 questions I want you to answer are as follows. So just 5 questions. Here we go. Will the federal government's decisions impact the day-to-day operations of my business and or my customers? So I'm just going to pause because I feel like people are going to have to like really think about these, but will the federal government's decisions impact the day-to-day operations of my business and or my customers? So yes, no, maybe, question mark. Number 2, if laws changed overnight, would my business survive? If laws changed overnight, so federal laws, would my business survive? If anyone is like really triggered right now, it's because you're probably thinking of tariffs. So if tariffs, if federal law, if things changed overnight, would my business survive? Is there a policy or regulation that would improve my business and or support my customers? Is there a policy or regulation that would improve my business and or support my customers? Next one. Number 4, are there contracts or funding I'd like to compete for on the federal level in the next 5 years? When I originally wrote this question, I wrote it as like 2 to 5 because I think things can move really quickly, but I think 5 is a good number to think about when you're answering this question. All right. And then number 5, is the problem that my company is trying to solve being addressed at the federal level, or should it be addressed by Congress? So is it being addressed at the federal level, or should it be addressed by Congress? And it could also be, should it be addressed by Congress with my help, right? So it's not just that Congress would take over, that you could also be helping them address the problem. Okay, so 5 questions. This is being recorded, so if you want to go back and look at them, or you can always email me, I can always email them to you. But this is basically, if you answered a certain amount, then we're going to say, great. If you answered 3 out of the 5 yes or maybe, you probably need a government affairs strategy. So if not, but like I said, I think about a lot of us probably need some sort of strategy when dealing with the federal government. And if you answered 3 to 5 of these as, oh yeah, like if I woke up tomorrow and laws changed, I wouldn't even know who to start calling in Congress. I wouldn't even know who to talk to at the agency. Ding, we need a government affairs strategy. So what does this all mean, right? Well, we're going to talk about it and where to start, right? That's more important. So where to start? First, this is really, when I'm saying where to start, I'm also talking about more like internal processes. So I don't want you just to like to pick up the phone and call like the biggest lobbying firm, you know. This is really for you to think about how would I even start approaching this or even engaging with people. So first, identify what the issue you are most interested in. So identify what issue you are most interested in. So maybe you're really interested in paid family leave. Maybe you're really interested in maternal health. Maybe you're really interested in caregiver support, right? What is that issue? Because that's going to determine, you know, which agency, which person, which people you're going to talk to. 2, find a trusted advisor to talk through long-term and short-term challenges. So this can be, you know, the financial implications for your company of bringing on a consultant. This can also be the implications of if you do nothing and then one of these, you know, something changes or you're going to have to respond rapidly. So I would say someone within your company or someone you trust to kind of have that conversation with to really map out some long-term and short-term challenges for the company. 3, get realistic on what can be done. You know, if you're gonna be like, I need $50 million in the next year, that's not really realistic. And anyone who tells you that is, like, run, they're not being realistic, but really be realistic on like what can be done, or you know, what you need done. 4, think about how much time your team can dedicate. And I say this because this will also help you decide, okay, like, should we go forward and create a position for an in-house lobbyist and government affairs person, or should we go forward and contract with a firm, a company, a consultant, right? Like, it will give you kind of that idea of like, how much time can we dedicate to this, and how do we want to approach it? And then 5, hire a government affairs professional or firm and request a proposal. So I would say request a proposal, you know, talk to as many people as you can and kind of see what the environment looks like after you've gone through these steps. All right, let's just go here and why it's important. So this is the why. I really like you know, visuals. So I just make things in PowerPoint and then hope other people understand what's on my mind and why I said it this way. But I like to describe it as this, right? Because I think people, when you talk about a government affairs consultant or a federal policy strategy, right, which is most likely going to be written with the help of someone. I think people are like, money, money, money. And it's right. You have a bottom line. You have to think about that. But at the end of the day, this is what a government affairs consultant, if they're good, or a firm or a new hire, can help you with. So you as a company want to go from A to B, right? In your federal policy strategy. You want to go from A to B. But the government affairs consultant might need to help you go to C, and they're also going to see if you're going to need to deal with D, E, F, and maybe Z, right? So this is the kind of thinking that you're going to access when you flip and you start thinking about federal policy and how my business, my idea, my concept, my advocates, how they interact with the federal government. So And I'll tell you, it's never A to B. It's like A to B1 or C2. It's not a very clear cut thing. So this is just kind of a showing you how we navigate these things. But okay, why it's important. So I would argue, and I say this in other trainings as well, that all policy is personal. So transportation, childcare, healthcare, taxes. Congress oversees trillions of dollars each year, and that includes your taxpayer dollars. And that is something that no matter how you shake it, it's going to impact you in some way or form. And members of Congress are elected by the public, which means you. And so they serve you. So if there's something that you want them to help you with, if there's something that you think they should care about, then you have every right to make your voice heard because they are writing policy every day that impacts your life, your daily life. Another way to put it is thinking through these stats, right? So if I haven't convinced you thus far, right, then let's think through these stats. The federal government has 5.2 million employees. There was $755 billion worth of contracts in fiscal year 2024. So that's how much they awarded. That's how much went out the door. It takes Congress, on average, 12 years to pass a new policy. So remember when I said sustainability? This is why, because this is not the short game. This is the long game. And this is something that it takes a lot of perseverance and, like I said, sustainability. The Constitution gives Congress the power over taxation, spending, taxation and taxes, etc. So that is something to really think about, is that they have the power of the purse, is basically what I'm saying. And then party control of Congress has changed 5 times since 2000. So 5 times since 2000. So it's not a consistent, you're not always with the same people that you think you're going to be with. And then just, what a GR professional, this is not everything, but, deducing down, now that we know the stats, now that we know why it's important, deducing down what they can help you with. So build your reputation on Capitol Hill, collect intelligence on policy decisions, help you respond to agency regulations and write legislation, plan briefings on Capitol Hill, or even fly-in days if you have folks who want to go on the Hill and meet with members. They can also help you secure federal funding to support your policy goals, right? So this is going to be one of our trainings on appropriations about federal funding and the process. So again, this is not everything that a GR professional can help you with, but it is something to think about when you're trying to discern how you want to approach your policy goals. And as I like to tell clients, if you don't ask to be at the table, you'll be upset when policy changes for the worse. So that is, something that I feel like I say, or I said like twice a day. You got to ask to be at the table. You got to ask to be at the table. No one's going to think of you and be like, this very innovative person in my district, I want them here. No, you have to ask to be there. And that's an important thing when you're deciding if you want a federal policy strategy. So final takeaways before we jump into Q&A, and just to kind of wrap this up. A federal policy strategy aligns your business goals to respond and adapt to the public policy environment. All things are political, even in the most apolitical situations. There are many ways to engage with Congress as part of a policy strategy, and federal policy impacts our businesses and our lives each day. And finally, GR strategies are proactive and sustainable. So with that being said, we're going to transition to Q&A. I think before we jump, I just want to put in a really quick plug. This is the first of 3 trainings, and in our second training, it is going to be on how to talk to Congress. I like to call this training "How to Make Federal Lawmakers Listen to You." And I'm going to do it with Jamie Belcito. She is the executive director and founder of the Maternal Mental Health Leadership Alliance, and she is also running for Congress in Massachusetts 4th District. So she is going to help me do a case study to show how she turned $0 into $24 million. So that is going to be ahead in our next training. And then the third training is going to be talking about those, like I said, those federal funding processes on how to get money from Congress and how Congress allocates billions of dollars each year. So with that, I'm gonna thank you. I think we're actually a little bit ahead of schedule, which is never how I'm normally running. But yeah, this is my contact information. So if you want to talk or you want the questions or whatever, please feel free to send me an email or call me. And yeah, Anna, I'm gonna go back to you.
Yeah. And the way we'll do this is just raise your Zoom hand and we'll leverage this time. But I wanted to maybe kick it off a little bit with some framing, additional framing. And Adriana, if you could go back to that slide where you had sort of the things that you can do, including getting a government affairs strategist.
Was it this one?
I think it was the go back one more. Yeah, that's what a GR professional can help you with. Keep going. Sorry to do
Right.
this.
No, no.
Oh, I love all your builds. One more. Yeah,
All my
that's
all
very
my
true.
all my
Yes, that's
transitions.
very true. Very true.
Let's
I
see.
think it's this one. Keep going. Oh, yes, this one. So where to
Where to start?
start?
Yeah.
I'm going to be selfish here too and add in a couple more. One, industry associations. That's one of the key reasons they exist. One of the key reasons we formed FamTech as a 501c6 is that we have the technical ability, meaning if we wanted to launch a formalized government relations or government affairs strategy on behalf of the FamTech industry, we can do that. Now, we are a newer organization. We're 3 years in existence, in formal existence. But the launch of our policy strategy committees are really there to help us hear from our membership. Where can we put our voice on behalf of everyone? So sometimes it's come together with your actual competitors or colleagues in the industry to advance particular policy and strategy. And so right now, our policy strategy committee members are formed from FamTech members as well as external parties across the general care economy. And we have a childcare subcommittee because there's a lot of policy happening in childcare. I'm sure you've read the headlines. And so what we're trying to do is have an outlet for individuals to come and share their priorities so that we can start formalizing how we can best put an innovation voice together for the Day at the Hill or fly-ins or whatever it may be. Um, the last little tidbit I'll share is uh, as an industry association, we have also become a member of Technology Councils of North America. So famtech.org can come in partnership with Technology Councils of North America to talk about R&D tax credits, to talk about all the technology specific regulations, AI, et cetera. So it's just another kind of avenue that we're trying to build to support you from technology policy, data privacy, security, access, statewide regulations, and then also from like a care economy market perspective, how can we support you? So I'm so grateful for Adriana kind of laying this out, but I also wanted to make a plug on the role of industry associations. And Adriana, I'd love to hear your experience in working with industry associations. Have you seen that play out on the Hill?
No, I have. I think industry associations are a really powerful tool. And it's something that I think it is helpful when there are policy debates going on and you need to figure out a collective voice or the voices in the room, right? Because I think policy can be really slow and then it can move really fast. And when you're a member of Congress or a congressional staffer, it's helpful when you are not hearing from maybe like, I don't know, 20 different industry partners or businesses, but you have one unified voice that says, hey, this is what we think of it. I think it just helps make your case and it shows that you're organized. I think one of the things that Hill staffers hate is like disorganization and hearing from, one person's like, this is what we think and this is what we think. So I think it really can be powerful if you are able to have a unified voice. And I think the key thing is, going through the processes to make sure everyone's on the same page, which they're figuring out at FamTech, and that's what FamTech is here for, to make sure that
Right.
there's unity. So I think that's really key. But yes, I can tell you when there are big votes, when there are things coming up, offices listen to hear what industry is saying, and they want to hear from associations and bigger, bigger organizations that are collectives of groups of like what their ideas are for the policy.
And I think as you're growing and scaling, figuring out when you need a specific personalized kind of government affairs strategy is equally important.
Yeah.
The other thing I'll just share as an update, Chelsea's on the call too. Spray Reagan is helping us with some of our policy strategy committee work. The immediate deliverable that you should keep your eyes open for in this next couple months is we are producing a guide for companies for digesting 45F and 45S. So 45S is paid family leave tax credit for employers. So if you're talking to an employer who's trying to figure out, you know, can I expand my benefit offering? All of these questions around treatment policy. We'll have a guide for you to be a thought leader with your potential customers. Similarly, 45F, that is for childcare, on-site childcare and childcare navigation solutions for employers to purchase those and get a tax credit. It's not perfect policy. There's a lot of flaws in it, but we're trying to break it down into like a decision tree. If, putting my founder hat on and going, what I wish I had, just quick, something I can talk to my customer about and seem knowledgeable. So that's what's kind of coming out of our first win from the Policy Strategy Committee. So please, I don't see any hands raised at the moment. If you have a question, let's leverage this time that we have, Adriianna, if you're sort of like wondering how to navigate or, what does the cycle look like? Or, I'm so excited for the next one. Jamie Belcito is, I think, one of the first, I'd say, FamTech candidates that's running for Congress. I'm thrilled. Her platform is like everything caregiver and maternal mental health that we care about. And so it's super cool that she's all in on FamTech and joining, the next session. We'll put a link. Oh, good. You see her link right there. Thank you, Takia. Awesome. Anyone want to come off mute or ask a question? Oh, thanks, Amber. Go right ahead.
Hi. So my wheels are turning 1,000 miles a minute. This is something I have been thinking about, but not now. My brain is, I can't even explain what it is. But outside of asking a million and one questions, the first question or only question I'll ask today is, what's the earliest signal that we're too late to engage in policy reactively rather than it being proactive?
Do you have an example, just like where your head is on that?
I'm just thinking about just caregiving in general. I know that there aren't a lot of policies related to that now, but you said there's a 12-year like pipeline essentially to get things passed. So not knowing where things are, who owns them,
Yeah.
how do we know when it's too late, or do you just jump in and hope for the best?
I mean, I'm like one of those weird people in the policy world where I'm like super optimistic. It's like we have like 5 minutes to get something done, and I'm like, but we have 5 minutes. We can change someone's mind. So I think that when you're starting, I think it's really just it is jumping in and seeing where you can be useful. Like Anna said, like you can join a trade association or you can join a coalition if you're like, I don't know how to like jump in myself on this, but I think the best thing to do is just to jump in. And like I said, it's a 12-year pipeline when we're talking about legislation, right? So like say FamTech all of a sudden tomorrow drops a bill and they're like, this is the FamTech, I don't know, HR 1234, FamTech's the best, I don't know, coalition ever, right? So so that bill 1234 we would say normally around 12 years to even get passed. So to get out of Congress to the president's desk. And that's, if Congress decides they want to pass it, right? So, but in the policy landscape, there's always something going on. Like Amber, you were saying, like the caregiving world. So I really feel like it's just like jumping in and looking at what is out there, right? There's the website congress.gov. You can probably, go today and type in caregiving and see how many bills have been introduced this Congress just on caregiving and see if there's any policy that you're like, wow, this is really good policy. I don't feel like it's ever too late. Maybe the only time it's too late is like if, you're I don't know, opposed to a bill and it's on the president's desk, right? It's like, well, he or future she is probably going to sign it. So that's the only time I'd be like, I don't know if we can do that much. But still, I'd be like, well, when the agencies start making regulations, we can, comment on that. So again, it's a very dynamic process. So yeah, I hope that answers your question. I don't think it's ever too late. I think it's just like figuring out the approach to dip your toe in. And that's really what I talk to people about. There's different levels of federal policy strategy. There's different levels of engagement, and not everyone needs to immediately like have a federal policy strategy and go to like the top firm in DC that's going to charge you like $1 billion, right? I tell people like, you really, that's why there's this step-by-step process. It's really getting clear on what you want to do, or that kind of what's realistic, and then taking that next step, to start engaging.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
And Amber, I'll share, we just saw this come out the door, which is the Caregiver Artificial Intelligence Prize competition. And that is kind of in partnership. There's a lot happening, I would say, in caregiving right now at the federal level. Awesome. Any other questions?
The policy idea that I have is less aimed at like corporations. I know there's always been like an emphasis on a corporate level for policy change. And I see a lot of the care infrastructure and policy that happens around businesses and backup care and childcare that like there's tax benefits for the corporation to offer these types of benefits. But not like a direct to consumer benefit. And so, we treat families who hire privately as consumers who are taxed as a consumer, but yet they're expected to run their home and they could be entrepreneurs, founders, business owners who don't work for a corporation. And so they are essentially employing and treated as employers, but then they are not able to write off those expenses as operational. And so trying to like advocate and create policy around that to where it's privatized instead of tied to a corporation.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on that?
This is very like, I'll give you like kind of my top of the mind things, but I haven't like been able to like digest this. I think that is doable, right? Like there are, like you said, there are a lot of policies that come out, especially in like the tax world, that it's like, yeah, if you're not a company with like, a bajillion accountants, like you're not going to benefit from this, right? But at the same time, I think that there are ways to build in policy and to build an ask and things like that that would benefit, like you said, direct to consumer or to the people who are running those businesses or from their home. And there are ways to do that. I think you'll benefit a lot, Stephanie, from hearing about the appropriations process, just because that is, I think, the the most underrated process in the federal government that a lot of people don't think about. But I do think with something like that, like an idea, there would be a period of testing and feeling it out with members of Congress and the people who make those decisions, right? So I think that there's a lot of wiggle room. I'm not gonna say there isn't, but there is also a kind of, I guess, I didn't put this in here, but there's like a testing process to see if there's an appetite, right? Because you have members of Congress who oversee different committees and agencies, and they have the ability to make decisions. And then you have the agency officials who might be like, no, we don't want to do this, right? So it's a few steps, a few more steps, I think, when you're kind of incubating a policy idea. But at the same time, it doesn't mean that a conversation can't be had.
Yeah.
I think what I've like talked to people about, and I have this like dream of like an event for like working parents on the Hill, like a working moms summit. I think sometimes too, the most important thing you can do when you're having a government relations strategy or you have policy goals or an idea is just bring it to the Hill and start the conversation. I think a lot of people don't always feel empowered to do that. And I think it's something that's really important because Hill staffers, like we would think that they're like, oh, look at all the cool work that FamTech is doing. And FamTech, is doing a lot of cool work, but it's like they're not going to proactively go out and seek that information. We have to bring it to them, right? we have to bring it to them. We have to bring the ideas to them, right? So I think
Mhm.
if you have an idea, if you can structure it
Yeah.
into like a policy goal, it's something that you can bring and see if anyone will bite. And I think that's like how you work with Congress. You're like, I have an idea. I wrote a bill for you. What do you think? And it's like, oh, I love when people would drop bills on my desk. I'm like, great,
Tell,
I didn't have to do half the work. So,
tell me when and where I started. My first job ever was when I was 10 years old selling door-to-door newspaper subscriptions. And I had lots of doors slammed in my face. So I will show up on the Hill. Just tell me what day
oh,
and
yeah,
And
yeah. I mean, yeah, you're ready. That's like the experience everyone on the Hill needs in order to work with the
I
Hill to get
love
doors
it.
slammed in their face. Yeah. So
yeah.
no, for sure.
Stephanie, one thing maybe to explore, there is a lot of historical conversation around benefits for 1099 workers who are excluded today because they're contractors. So 1099 benefits is one. The other, self-employed, gets really wonky because it depends on your corporation status. Are you an LLC? Are you a C Corp? Are you an S Corp? Each one has a different treatment of employment benefit eligibility. And so, like, you get really nitty gritty very quickly. So, like, if you're trying to pass a policy that brings benefit incentives across four different corporation layers and employment structures, it's possible, but it tends to be piecemeal. What can
Mhm.
1099 workers have? What can an LLC single member,
Right.
pass-through entities have?
Yeah.
Well, because you cannot employ a nanny or a domestic worker under your business payroll. You can't. It's not legal. So you're still treated as like it's not an operational expense, but without that support, I couldn't run my business.
Mhm.
So you're
I think you should talk to Delaney, who's on this call, who's like an expert in nanny compensation.
yeah, Delaney, I would love
But
actually,
you're talking about for your own company, right?
well, even just
Like,
for
I mean,
parents,
we employ our nannies. Our nannies are W-2, but that's not what you're talking about, is it?
no, that's not what
No,
I'm talking about. I'm just talking about general for any type of like for us, because I have that
Yeah.
business, right? It
right.
makes sense. I can do that because I'm a nanny agency, but families should be able to have this same ability to employ someone because a lot of families are employing their own nannies and that they are expected to W-2 them, that it's against policy to employ a domestic worker as a 1099. So now you're a W-2 employer. So if I'm being treated as a business and I'm having to employ this person, but I can't employ them under my business, I have to
Mhm.
employ them under my family, then I'm
Mhm.
still operating as a business and I can't write that off as
Hmm.
an operational expense.
Yeah.
Let's
Yeah.
talk more on that offline because I think there is definitely ways, and we are looking for that. And we have companies that are trying to build these infrastructure elements for business owners, small business owners. You
Mhm.
could even get a tax credit maybe under 45F. We just learned this for individuals, like individual childcare providers to provide childcare. And so definitely would love to explore your individual situation because a lot of it, unfortunately, what we're learning has to do with how the organization is structured.
Yeah.
Long story short, though, we have time for a couple more questions. Um, I'm curious, uh, is anyone in the paid caregiver world or working on paid caregiver legislation? There's a lot going on there. Um, or anyone in childcare regulation that has a question or is active.
I work in childcare.
Hey, Jamie. Oh, so good to see
Hello.
you.
We're
Hey, it's
not
been a while.
we are not working on anything actively in terms of advocacy,
Mhm.
but work as a service with government. So happy to participate in any conversation around
Are
it.
you actively looking like you're contracting with government entities?
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And
State, cities, counties. We don't have a federal government contract directly, but yeah.
do you have a outsourced or in-house government affairs?
Um, no. We have in one state we're currently trialing a like government affairs
Mhm.
relationship. This just started a few months ago. We've been doing this public work since like 2019 and it's all just been our own relationship building really
Hmm.
through partnerships. But I know that other competitors of ours do hire lobbyists, which I don't know
Hmm.
if that's the same term as government affairs people or not.
Yeah, it
But
is.
okay. And some spend a lot of money on that.
Hmm.
We have not raised and don't plan to raise the same levels of venture capital as those competitors, and so don't plan that strategy. So we've had to be more creative about
Hmm.
value-driven responses to the market
Hmm.
and yeah, and just more creativity around getting the word out there and creating the opportunities. It hasn't been necessarily, it's been more state level policy change that we've been
Hmm.
driving toward, and really more about like creating the pathway to the solutions, not changing tax
Hmm.
law and things like that.
Right.
Yeah.
And, I thank you so much, Jamie, for letting me put you on the spot because I think you're further along in kind of like navigating this intersection in your world. It's sort of I have to work with state level agencies for my business. That's a whole nother game. And that maybe, Adriana, it'd be interesting to hear your point of view. How do I determine if it's more effective for me to work at the federal level versus the state level? What are
Ooh.
some indicators on that?
I think the main thing that I would say like versus the federal or the state, I always tell people like micro or macro, right? So like at the state level, if there's a lot going on or a lot of regulation and oversight of an issue, which we know a lot of these issues, even though the federal government has programs, they're overseen and regulated by the states, then I think the state level is really important to engage with. However, I think, as you're kind of looking at, okay, well, maybe we need macro solutions, or maybe the state level, we're good. Like we understand the legislation, we're good. We understand the power players, etc. Then I think that's when people make the pivot to the federal level because they realize that there is that macro conversation, and they want to
Mhm.
shape that policy. So that is always a tricky one because I think it's hard with issues where it's like the federal government can do things that make an impact, especially I mean like we saw with a lot of like the caregiving work during COVID, right? There were like all these programs, all these things coming out from the federal government. Um, but then, with the state level, they might be writing their own legislation, doing their own regulations. So I think it's just really determined on those short-term versus long-term goals. And if
Mhm.
you're really, micro focused and you're like, hey, I need to know everything going on with the state and regulations and legislation because this is going to have an immediate impact on what we're doing in our business, then I think, putting resources to the state is better. But if it's like, I need to be engaged in the federal policy conversation because I'm seeing all these tax credits come out. I'm seeing all these things, moving in my sphere of influence, then I think there's always a pivot that could be helpful for the federal level.
And is it like a rule of thumb or a standard if I'm going to hire or work with a government affairs person and I want it to be more state centric about policy influence, or I want it to be about federal contracting or state level contracting? Would those be two different types of lobbyist or government affairs people or relations people?
So I would argue yes, because I think it
Hmm.
really like that's when it like comes down to goals, right? Because it's like if I just want to hire someone to apply for state level grants, that's probably not a government affairs person. That's not a government affairs consultant. That's more of like a state level government grant writer or contract person, right? Like I think that's a little bit different. And that's also on the federal level, right? There's people who are like really focused on that kind of work. Um, so I think that's why I kind of said like have different proposals, ask around a little bit as
Hmm.
you're looking for this because it might not be the best fit. Like maybe one firm is really good at contracts and regulations and like
Hmm.
oversight of agencies, and maybe another firm or consultant is really good at relationships and strategy and creativity and ideas, right? So
Hmm.
it's really
Hmm.
good to kind of pull that apart.
Hmm.
Um, and see, and absolutely, like some firms are really focused on state level and they're really in the depth of state level, and some firms are federal. And I think also something to note is like sometimes there are clients, sometimes there are organizations that they only do federal work. And I think people would think it would be like reverse, like, oh, you'd only really want to focus on state and local and never touch federal. But I've actually seen the reverse where I've seen organizations that are like, no, I just want to work on the federal stuff and the state stuff, we'll
Mm-hmm.
monitor, but we're not,
Mm-hmm.
in the weeds. So I think that's another thing. It's not always you have to, start on the micro level and then go macro. Some people are like,
Mm-hmm.
I think Go Macro is actually like a protein bar. But some people are like, I want to, some people are like, I want to be on, the national level. I want to be in like the
Mm-hmm.
big conversations. So that's an okay approach as well when you're looking at a strategy. Maybe you don't want to spend the resources on the
Mm-hmm.
smaller state stuff and your team can just monitor that internally. You really want to focus on the larger conversation.
Mm-hmm. That's helpful.
Yeah.
I think just knowing that it's not just we do government relations and that's a broad swath of activity. You have to, if you are assessing this going forward, determining where your biggest opportunity is. Is it at the state? Is it at the kind of contracting level?
Yeah.
Is it at the yeah, go ahead, Jamie.
Yeah, I was going to say in my experience, which is limited, but what I've also heard at the state level advocacy and work, I mean, a lot of times it's firms like states depend, they're different sizes, but they're very like focused on their state and especially in small states, it's like everyone knows everybody and the lobbyists or government relations folks are very embedded in that state, and so it's better to work with someone who has it's all relationship driven, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
Yep.
And you want them to be able to be strategic and help you think of a strategy and ideally at least understand what you're talking about, so they can do that well. But it's a lot about just opening doors and like having relationships, and so
So like you're buying their Rolodex to date
essentially,
myself.
essentially, yes. And I like not in my experience, but what I've heard is like sometimes
Mhm.
it's like the former governor of that state who's now a
Yes.
lobbyist,
Yes.
and has a, which, kills me to even think that that is the way that things get done, but unfortunately is true. So,
Right.
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, I see we're at time, want to be respectful of your time. Really excited about our conversations. Adriana, thank you again for kind of opening this aperture for all of us. Please don't hesitate to send questions, reach out to Adriana. Let us know if there's other things you want us to take on or talk about. And wishing everyone a good rest of your day. Thank you so much.
Thank you.